Welcome to the channel, guys. Now, I've had a few requests lately if I could do a video on the fundamentals or the foundations of the setup in the golf swing. How do you address the ball? How do you grip it? All these things are so important, no matter what level of golfer you are. If you can start from a good solid foundation, then you're going to make some better and more consistent swings. Think of it like building a house. If you haven't got the good foundations put in place, then as you start to swing, everything can start come crumbling and tumbling down. So in today's video, I'm going to share some of the keys to a good setup position. So let's get straight into it. Firstly is aim. So important, and something that many of us often struggle with, but when you're practicing, let's check our aim. So a simple thing you can do here is just get 3 alignment sticks or golf clubs on the ground, and they're going to be positioned in such a way that this one on the right here, this orange stick, is going to be basically more or less aiming at my target over the water there at that flag in the distance. This inside stick is going to be parallel to that, think like train tracks. So this isn't actually aiming at the target, it's aiming left of the target, but parallel to the target line. Now this is where I'm going to have my feet, knees, hips and shoulders all parallel to that stick. And this third one here is ball position. So we'll talk about that in a moment, but aim is so important when you're taking your setup to ensure, if you're looking to hit a relatively straight shot of course, that your leading edge of your golf club is pointing at your target or down the target line. So the second thing is how to set up with good aim when you're on the golf course, because of course this is great on the range or when you're practicing, but on the golf course I like to encourage something we call spot aiming. So you may have heard of this. A very simple thing, but a great thing to do. So if you take an imaginary line from your target out there in the distance and come all the way back to your ball, and if you find just in front of your ball, a couple of feet in front here, if you was on the golf course, you might find something like a leaf or a divot or an old tee peg if you're off the tee. And if that's in line with your target now, this gives you a much closer reference point in which to aim your club face. If I was on the course here, I might find something, a leaf or a dark patch of grass or something here in the rough that I could align to. So in this instance, I'm going to pick this, let's say it's a little bit of rough there, a dark patch of rough. So I'm going to set up, get my golf club aiming perpendicular to that, and then I'm going to build my stance around that imaginary line. Of course, you won't have these sticks when you're on the golf course. So from there, then you can take your setup, build your stance parallel to that imaginary line, and now you're in a good alignment, good consistent alignment there at setup. So that's aim. Ball position, hugely important, and of course this varies depending on the club that you're using, due to the length of the club or the loft of the club changing. So a good rule of thumb, this is my kind of philosophy on ball position, is if you can set up with an alignment stick here when you're practicing, if you were hitting, let's say, a standard wedge shot or a scoring club, let's say an 8, 9 pitching wedge, sand wedge, those sorts of clubs, then I would tend to prefer the ball positioned pretty much in the center of your stance relative to your heels, because what you'll notice is I actually encourage most players to flare their feet out slightly, and depending on people's hip mobility and how they like to stand, this might vary. So if you start to look at your ball position relative to your toes, now this in fact starts to change, of course. So if your toes are different, that ball position is changing relative to the toes, but it's staying the same relative to the balance and how you're going to move. So always think relative to your heels, and in this instance the ball would be positioned pretty much in the center. Now as you start to, let's say you go to the other extreme of a driver, then that ball would be positioned much more off your left or your front heel. So that would be where you'd have the ball pretty much here, a wider stance, and now the ball's much more off your front foot, off your lead heel. So 2 things I like to do to teach both the standard short iron setup and a driver is if you start with your feet together, ball in the middle, and with a mid iron or short iron, you can then take a medium step to the left, medium step to the right, and you've kind of already got that pretty much in a good position. If it's the other extreme with the driver, start again, ball in the middle, feet together, and just take a baby step to the left, big step to the right, and now all of a sudden you're positioned correctly with the ball for that particular club. And then of course we've got everything in between. So if this here is my scoring club, the short iron, then if I went up to a 7, then the ball would go slightly ahead of that. The stance would get a little bit wider. 6 iron, it'll move slightly ahead, stance a little bit wider. 5 iron, a little bit wider, and then you move up to your driver, which of course would be where we mentioned earlier on. So generally what you would like to see, or not like to see, is you don't really want the ball positioned at any point forward of your lead heel or any point behind the center of your heels. So you're always positioning it somewhere in here. Stance width will vary, but this will be generally where your ball's positioned. Of course, you can play the ball back here or further forward if you're playing a specialist type of shot, but nothing pretty much for a standard golf shot. So that's my thoughts on ball position. Now, that can also change depending on your preference of ball flight or your tendencies as a golfer. As a coach, we can utilize that to improve your ball flight, but that's something that's very individual. So there's ball position. So we've got alignment, we've got ball position. Now, a hugely important one now is balance and posture. And so posture is super important. Balance is super important in the golf swing. So you've generally got sort of 3 balance points, 4 in the golf swing. You've got your feet, your center of your hips, and pretty much your upper chest here. So what you want to do at setup is be nice and balanced, nice and athletic, and so that when you make a swing, you're not going to get off balance with these points too much. If you do a backswing like this, then the through swing tends to look like this, and then you're off balance, and all sorts of things start to happen from there. So good balance is key to making a nice, powerful, balanced, athletic move throughout the swing. So when it comes to posture, I like to get players to, if they're just standing up normally, is to get their hip bones, which is a little bit below where most people would bend from. So go a little bit lower for your hip bones, almost near the bottom of your pockets there, and you'll feel those lumpy bits at the side. You can just move your knees around to kind of feel them. And from there, that's where I like a player to then just tilt forward. So what I don't want to do is be sticking the bum out too much, just naturally just tilting forward, and you'll feel a lot of the weight start to shift more towards the balls of the feet, which is fantastic. And then from there, just a little softness of the knees, and that'll get you in a nice, solid, balanced position where your balance point pretty much runs straight through your knees, through to the balls of your feet. So what you don't want to be is too far back this way or too far on your toes, because again, if you start off too much this way, oftentimes in the swing, you're going to lose balance and it's going to send the club with it as well. So nice, good athletic posture to start with. Stance width is an important one, of course, as well. Again, varies depending on the club, but if you're using a standard mid-iron, then I would recommend pretty much shoulder width for most players. And so that would be my heels about shoulder width, or the width of my hips would pretty much fit inside my heels. So that's a good general starting point. Just be mindful that depending on your flexibility, if you go too wide, then you'll have a lot of stability in the swing, but it'll be more difficult to rotate. Vice versa, if you go too narrow, you're going to find it very easy to rotate, but you're not going to have much stability. So it's finding that good ground for you. So that would be pretty much a general iron shot, and then obviously the driver and the 3-wood, making bigger, more powerful swings. The stance will get slightly wider as you progress up the clubs. And next, well, a common question I get asked is, Danny, how close or how far away do I need to be from the ball at setup? And that's a great question. It kind of varies depending on your tendencies and what's happening with the golf swing. But in general, my preference is certainly for a player to be closer to the golf ball or the dress. So what I mean by that, a lot of players you'll see might get a little bit reachy in the golf swing. So they might be stretching a bit too much for the ball, and then it'll send the balance off in the golf swing, or they'll have to do different things to get to the ball, and it can lead to inconsistent strikes and inconsistent motions. So for me, I like to get players much closer, sometimes a bit uncomfortably close to the ball, because what that does, getting that bit closer, it encourages or almost forces a player to join their swing to create room in which to deliver the golf club to the ball. And that creating room helps you to maintain better posture, better angles throughout the swing. So I think it just encourages a lot of positive things in the swing. And so what I mean by getting closer to the ball, a general rule of thumb for me is to get sort of a hand span width from your thigh to the butt end of your golf club, assuming the clubs are correctly fitted for you. Another way you can look at it is as you're looking down, getting the butt end of your club pretty much over your toes at address. So they're not too far away, too big a gap, and you're not too close that you're so bunched in that your arms are almost falling behind your shoulders. So that's a good little checkpoint too, is if you're just letting your arms hang from a good posture, that's pretty much where you'd like to be, pretty much straight down from your shoulders. So that's my preference, get a bit closer to the ball, and then you can make a good athletic move from there. And then the final point I'll touch on is the grip. Obviously a very important foundation. It's our only contact with a golf club, and it's the thing that has the most influence on the club face throughout the swing, which also has the most influence on where the ball starts and where it goes. So grip, hugely important, lots of different ideas for this. Again, my preference is to find your natural grip, and it doesn't necessarily mean neutral. Grips are, I believe, quite individual, and so to find your natural grip, you can simply take that nice setup position that you had, just let your arms hang, leave them nice and loose, and just see where they fall. Now for me, what you'll find is both my hands turn in a little bit this way, and so that would actually encourage more of a, I guess, slightly stronger left hand and a slightly weaker right hand. But for me, that fits my natural grip as I bring those hands together. And it's almost like I'll be squeezing my hands together when I take hold of the grip, because pushing your hands together a little bit there can create some stability in a club head as well. Equal and opposite forces, so if you're pushing together, it's going to create stability as a result of that, rather than your hands fighting against each other. So for me, that's quite natural, and for yourself that might be different, but that's how I would like to see the grip, nice and natural. From there, changes can be made, of course. If there's patterns in your ball flight that you might want to change, then obviously the grip's a huge influence. There are things that we can do, but for someone starting out, I would recommend as natural as possible with their grip. And holding, again, presuming the clubs are correct length, holding about 1/4 of an inch from the top of the club there for where you start to hold it, and so that would be my preference. Now, there's also 3 types of grips that you generally see, and we'd call them the baseball grip, this one here, where you've got all the fingers on the grip. You've got the overlapping grip, which is a very popular option, and you've got the interlocking grip. Now, either of those are fine. I tend to prefer either the overlapping or the interlocking for most players. Ladies, I believe this is quite a good grip, the baseball there, because it just creates a bit more stability on the grip. But generally, you would find players with smaller hands, or people with smaller hands, like myself, the interlocking is actually a little bit more comfortable. This is something I've done for many years, copying obviously Tiger Woods. He was the guy who got me into golf, as many of us did. So I like the interlocking, but let's just find what's right for you and a good natural grip. So that's pretty much the fundamentals there. We've spoken about alignment, we've spoken about ball position, we've spoken about posture, we've spoken about balance, we've spoken about the grip. So I hope that gives you a good idea of how to set up to the golf ball, and for some varying clubs, whether it's your short iron or your driver. And I hope that really helps. If there's any questions there on setup, please let me know. Like I say, the foundations are so important, because if they're not quite set in place, then as you make the swing, things can come crumbling down. So from good foundations, we can start to build a good swing, good balance, and hopefully some consistent golf shots as well. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe. Lots more great videos to come. Like I say, any questions, let me know, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.